When it comes to this whole war between Russia and Ukraine, the biggest point of discussion is this Ukrainian counteroffensive, to which the media has been expressing nothing but jubilation. The Western media, that is, not the media in Russia. Western media has been in a state of ecstasy over this. The valiant Ukrainian warriors advanced against the Russian orcs, and the Russians fled, and the Ukrainians were able to retake thousands of square kilometers of territory from the evil Russians. But what has been receiving very, very little attention is how the Ukrainians could end up becoming more vulnerable to a Russian counterattack. Because reportedly, the Ukrainians have been advancing deeper into Russian-held territory. And the more territory that they take, the longer they're going to have to travel to transport munitions to Ukrainian troops, which could lead to a logistical complication. And if they travel too deep into Russian territory, they could end up becoming cut off and completely open to a Russian attack. It reminds me of what happened in the 1920s. In the year 1920, Poland wanted to take Kiev away from Soviet control. And so the Poles made an alliance with the Ukrainians, and this was when Poland was under Pilsudski. They made an alliance with the Ukrainians. They advanced into Kiev, and the Russians ran away. The Soviets ran away, and everybody thought, wow, the valiant, courageous, tenacious, fearless Poles and Ukrainians were able to repulse the Russians, these evil Soviets. But what happened? What happened was Poland traveled too much. It was in the middle of Kiev. The Polish military was in the middle of Kiev, far away from home, and they were cut off. The Soviets cut them off, surrounded them, and the Poles and the Ukrainians had to retreat. This could end up being the case with this conflict. There is already talk in Russia about a major counter-strike that the Russians want to execute. And the Russians are currently attacking Ukrainian troops, and Ukrainian soldiers are still dying. The BBC put out an article recently talking about how the Ukrainians could end up becoming more vulnerable because the Ukrainians retook territory from both within the Kherson region in the south and the Kharkiv region in the northeast. So now the Ukrainians are going to have to fight on two fronts. That could end up with Ukraine spreading itself out too thinly and becoming more vulnerable. So I want to read to you guys an excerpt from this article from the BBC. Now, this article from the BBC, of course, says, look, Ukraine took this wonderful victory. It has to do a pre-qualification, right? A pre-qualifier. But nonetheless, the article does express a warning for Ukraine, that Ukraine could end up becoming more open to a Russian counterattack. It says here in this article, and I'll try to do my best British accent, but Ukraine is finding it harder to make gains in the south, where they're more exposed, having to fight in mostly open countryside. An advancing army needs more troops and firepower to overcome a defending army. The danger for Ukraine may now be similar to the one Russia faced in the early stages of the war. Trying to advance on multiple fronts can prove costly in terms of ammunition, equipment, and troops. The bigger the gains, the longer the supply lines, which can then be targeted by a defender. There's also the risk that those forces that have advanced furthest, creating a budge in the defensive line, could become surrounded. In other words, if Ukraine continues to take territory back from Russian control, they're going to have to travel longer distances to bring munitions to the Ukrainian soldiers as they're fighting deeper and deeper into Russian-held territory, and that could lead to logistical complications. Despite the optimism, Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov has warned that Ukraine's forces in the east could now be more vulnerable to a Russian counterattack. Seizing territory is not enough. An army has to hold the ground too. That might prove easier if the local population are behind you. Ukraine's double-pronged offensive is still risky. It could easily suffer setbacks. But this is much more than simply seizing back land, even if that is the ultimate goal. So this is what very few people are talking about. Everyone's saying, oh, look, the Russians, they left behind tanks. They left behind trucks. Oh, my God, what a bunch of losers. You guys don't realize Russia was once a major empire. These guys have been doing warfare for centuries and centuries. These people aren't stupid. Just because they ran away doesn't mean that they're hopeless. And it sure as hell doesn't mean that there is absolutely no way that there is a strategy behind this retreat. And so there was an article that I found in the Russian media. This is from a Russian publication called mk.ru. And it says here that according to the former head of intelligence of the ground forces of the Russian Federation, Rustem Kulipov, the Russian army will certainly launch a counter-strike, and it will be a blow with a side approach to the liver, not where the armed forces of Ukraine previously stopped. He said, quote, this is what the former head of intelligence of the ground forces of the Russian Federation said. His name is Rustem Kulipov. He said, quote, we will launch our counterattack, that's for sure, but I think not in the places where Ukrainian counterattacks were carried out, because it makes no sense to hit where their main forces are concentrated. It is necessary in a boxing match, in a boxing way, with a call to the side, strike to the liver. A blow to the liver can also put the opponent on his knee. It depends on the genius of our generals. There is another article, this is published by md.zargrad. It says that the Russian armed forces are defending, and it basically says that the Russians are currently killing Ukrainian soldiers in high numbers. And it says that the Russian armed forces are defending in the Izium direction. Powerful Russian missiles are hitting the enemy, and the Ukrainian regions adjacent to the Kharkiv direction are so crowded with wounded soldiers. So the Russians are already attacking Ukrainian soldiers who are near Kharkiv, and it says here that that there are so many wounded Ukrainian soldiers that they are being sent to Kiev, and there have been many ambulances used for this. The Russian fighters hold the line and give a tough rebuff to the armed forces of Ukraine. Regional hospitals close to the Kharkiv direction are so overcrowded with wounded soldiers that they are taken to Kiev. Videos of ambulances rushing through the capital of Ukraine appeared on social networks. So Ukrainians are still getting slaughtered. Yes, the Ukrainians took back thousands of square kilometers from Russian control, but this does not mean that Russia is going to lose. And nor does it mean that Ukraine has this huge chance of winning this war. It could just mean that Russia is leading the Ukrainians into a trap. Could also mean that the Russians are simply moving back into Donbass, where they have much more of an advantage because the Donbass region is more flat, it's more rural, and that's where Russian tanks really thrive, and that's where the Ukrainians are going to have a tremendous amount more of difficulty. And it could be that the Russians are just utilizing this strategy so that they can take Donbass and make it a part of the Russian Federation. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.